Alerts and workflow is the solution that allows you to prevent those situations from occurring that make you say, if only we had known, because sadly, by the time you often do find out about those conditions, about those events, it's too late. You might have to write off bad debt. A customer might have gone elsewhere with their business. So alerts and workflow would actually be more appropriately named alerts, reports, and workflow, because those are the three key components of the Sage Alerts and Workflow technology. Before I get into the details of that technology, however, I would like to mention that Sage Alerts and Workflow, although today we're talking about it specifically for its use with Sage 300, Sage Alerts and Workflow can be used with your other business applications as well, whether there are applications from Sage software like Sage CRM, or whether those are applications from other vendors. Sage Alerts and Workflow is not Sage specific. It can be used to monitor and respond to conditions of data in all of your business applications from Sage software, from other vendors, or even homegrown applications of your own. As far as the industries that Sage Alerts and Workflow operates with, it covers everything from manufacturing to education, government, retail, financial. We're actually currently at just over 12,000 organizations worldwide using the Sage Alerts and Workflow solution. And that includes everyone from 2, 3, and 4-person locally run organizations all the way up through multinational corporations and businesses. And we'll talk about some of those uses in just a few minutes. Let's now drill down into specifically what Sage Alerts and Workflow can do for you and for Sage 300. Alerts and Workflow starts out by monitoring in an automated fashion your Sage 300 application for any business conditions that are important to you. And that last phrase bears repeating, any business conditions. Some of the typical types of conditions that Alerts and Workflow can monitor and respond to in Sage 300 are listed on the current slide. Now, typically, when you tend to talk about alerts, people think of their alarm clock alongside their bed. And although reminders are a good use of Alerts and Workflow, the types of conditions that Alerts and Workflow can monitor for can be very sophisticated, truly business intelligence level conditions, such as a client who has stopped ordering from you, a client who has changed their buying habits, a client who has had a change to their credit limit or credit status. It is safe to say any condition of data that's important to you and your organization can be monitored, identified, and responded to by Alerts and Workflow. I mentioned that I like to use analogies to describe this technology. Another one that I particularly like is to think of Alerts and Workflow as a smoke detector for your business data. At home, you have smoke detectors that sit and look and watch for smoke and notify you if any is detected. Likewise, Sage Alerts and Workflow sits in your IT organization and monitors Sage 300 and your other applications for conditions you need to know about and need to respond to. Now, I mentioned that Alerts and Workflow, although we're going to focus on Sage 300 today, it can work with your other business applications as well, such as a sales or CRM system, a human resources application, customer service application. In fact, Alerts and Workflow will work with any application that uses a standard relational database, such as Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, Sybase, Informix, Access, and the list goes on. Now, when I talked earlier about monitoring your business data, I made a brief allusion to the fact that a source of data coming into your organization is email. We all together get too much email on a daily basis, but some of that email is important. And particularly if you have generic email accounts like info@yourcompany.com or sales@ or support@, I always like to ask, what happens to email messages that are sent to those generic accounts? Or are those generic accounts black holes where emails go, sadly, to die? Alerts in Workflow can monitor the content of incoming email. It can see who's sending those email messages and match them up with records in Sage 300. It can determine if a person is requesting certain information or assistance, and Alerts in Workflow can automatically provide that information back to that person. I think it's always important when considering the vast amount of data that your organization is trying to manage that you not ignore incoming email as a major source of that data. Now, because Alerts in Workflow has the ability to monitor information in multiple applications, it's also worth noting that Alerts in Workflow can monitor conditions between those applications. So yes, you're using Sage 300 for your ERP, but maybe you're also using Sage CRM, or you have a different sales or CRM application. Think how useful it would be if Alerts in Workflow were able to see a new sales opportunity entered in your CRM system for a customer who might be on credit hold in Sage 300, or might have overdue invoices in Sage 300, or for that matter doesn't have sufficient credit left to pay for that new opportunity if it were closed. So Alerts in Workflow can analyze and monitor conditions between multiple business applications. Now, two last areas of monitoring I'd like to talk about with Alerts in Workflow. The first, over on the middle right of the current slide, is the ability to monitor your operating system. Now, folks use Alerts in Workflow for monitoring their applications, their email, and so it stood to reason that they said, hey, can we use Alerts in Workflow to tell us when a server is running low on disk space, if we've recorded some kind of errors on a machine, or for that matter, maybe a user has let their Outlook email box fill up. Alerts in Workflow can also monitor the operating system. But even more important than that, to me, is on the middle left of the current slide. New in Alerts in Workflow version 9, just released, is what we call delivery monitoring, and most importantly, alert acknowledgments. You know, an alert is only as good as its ability to reach its intended recipient, and for that matter, that recipient's ability to act on that alert. It's no good if you send someone an alert message and they don't get it. It's no good if you send someone an alert message and they don't have time to take on that particular task. With Alerts in Workflow, not only does it check to make sure the alerts are successfully delivered, it actually gives the recipients the ability to acknowledge receipt of an alert and even specify what action they're going to take on that alert. A very common scenario in Sage 300 is order confirmations. When a new sales order is placed, Alerts in Workflow can send out an order confirmation to the customer saying, this is what you've ordered. Are you okay with the details of this order? That customer can use the acknowledgement function in Alerts in Workflow to say, yes, I'm good with the order as it stands. No, I'm not good with the order as it stands, and possibly here are the changes that I need made to that order, all part of this acknowledgement capability. Now, we've talked about the monitoring part of Alerts in Workflow. Let's now talk about how it can respond. First and foremost, sending alerts. Email, certainly the most common alert delivery method. People always ask, what email systems does Alerts in Workflow support? It's a good question with an easy answer. All of them. Microsoft Outlook, or Exchange-based email, hosted Outlook, also known as Outlook 365, SMTP, or Internet-based email systems, as well as hosted mail systems like Gmail, Hotmail, and Yahoo Mail, all supported. But email is only one alert delivery method. We wouldn't be where we are if we didn't support methods such as sending a text message to a person's mobile device, or perhaps just popping up a message right on someone's screen to let them know that something requires their attention via instant message. Also, being able to populate dynamic web dashboards, and even sending faxes to those organizations that are still using fax machines, all supported in Alerts in Workflow. Now, sometimes sending an alert message needs to be a little bit more detailed. As I mentioned earlier, you might want to send a customer an order confirmation. At the end of the month, you might want to automatically send them a statement. If they're behind on their payments, you might wish to send them a statement before the end of the month. Vendors, you might wish to trigger purchase orders to. If a customer is particularly behind in their payments, you might want alerts and workflow to generate an AR aging report for that customer and automatically deliver that report to that customer's account manager. Well, alerts and workflow has what we call the reports module. This gives alerts and workflow the ability to trigger, generate, and deliver any crystal report to any recipients, whether they're your own staff, your customers, vendors, etc. Now, these reports could be scheduled, such as a daily stock status or a week-ending AR aging report, but they can also be triggered based upon business conditions. There's no need to perhaps generate an AR aging report for a customer if they're not overdue. But if a customer does become overdue, if a customer gets to within 10% of their credit limit, then you might want alerts and workflow to generate that AR aging report and deliver it to the appropriate recipients. And also, sometimes a picture is really worth 1,000 words. And so instead of sending a 5 or 10-page report or email message, how about sending a chart or a graph? Alerts and workflow includes the ability to generate bar charts, pie charts, line charts, comparative performance charts, and deliver those as part of the alert messages. And finally, in alerts and workflow, we come to the workflow part of the solution. And by that, what we really mean is the ability for alerts and workflow to go back into Sage 300, or for that matter, into other applications, and actually add or update data. For example, if a customer reaches a certain point where they are severely past due in paying for their invoices, we might want alerts and workflow to automatically put that client on credit hold. If a client is put on credit hold in Sage 300, you might want alerts and workflow to notice that and go over to Sage CRM and perhaps put the customer on hold over there, or possibly even schedule a phone call in Sage CRM for the appropriate account manager to make to the customer to try and resolve that credit situation. This workflow consists of a suite of tools, some which are wizard-driven, others more sophisticated or programmatic in nature, but they allow you to update and add information in any application database that you happen to be using. Now, you've got an idea for the capabilities of alerts and workflow. It might interest you to know that a few years ago, we worked with an analyst to survey roughly 1,100 customers who were currently using Sage Alerts and Workflow. We asked them a number of questions about their use of the software. After having asked and received answers to those questions, we worked with an analyst to create a return on investment calculator. It turned out that the average payback period for customers investing in alerts and workflow was 88 days, just under 3 months. And that ROI calculator is available on our website if you'd like to go through it and put in your own numbers and see how quickly you could pay off your investment in the alerts and workflow technology. So before we take a look at that technology, I just want to kind of go back to talk about some of the types of business pains. Early on, you heard me use the phrase, if only we had known. That certainly is something that alerts and workflow can address, knowing too late. As I said, knowing too late is almost as catastrophic as not knowing at all. You know, on this slide, we talk about redundant tasks. The number one use of alerts and workflow with Sage 300 is, in fact, sending out messages that are order confirmations, that are invoices, and that are statements. Now, currently, a lot of organizations perform those tasks manually. And so think about the standard tasks that your staff are performing multiple times a day and ask yourself, can we automate that process through a technology like alerts and workflow? And finally, I always like to end the PowerPoint by saying, Alerts and workflow enables you to be a more proactive organization. Don't put out fires. Don't wait for fires to occur and then try and fix them. Anticipate they're happening and prevent the fires from breaking out in the first place. Once again, I'm back to that analogy of the smoke detector. So, with that, let me exit from the PowerPoint and let me show you and talk about alerts and workflow itself. Now, one thing I do need to mention, because I just noticed something on my current window, you might, in your exploration of alerts and workflow, hear some people refer to the technology also under the name of Knowledge Sync. We're here at Vineyard Software, the creator of the alerts and workflow technology, and our internal name for the product is Knowledge Sync. So if you hear me say Knowledge Sync or you run into some documentation that refers to Knowledge Sync, know that it is 100% the same as Sage Alerts and Workflow. So, a couple words about the technology in general. Number one, it's a server-based application. That means you're typically going to install it on just one machine within your IT environment. Alerts and Workflow does not need its own server. You could put it on the Sage 300 application server. You could put it on your Exchange server, or for that matter, even run it on a workstation. Alerts and Workflow runs under any Windows-based operating system, so that makes that a short conversation. And Alerts and Workflow itself stores its own data in a choice of 3 different formats, like Sage 300. Microsoft SQL Server is our preferred database format, but we also allow Alerts and Workflow to be hosted under SQL Express, as well as Microsoft Access, your choice. No difference in licensing, pricing, or functionality. So, to go back to our smoke detector analogy, the way Alerts and Workflow operates is you tell it to watch out for certain business conditions, like invoices that are coming overdue, clients who have had their credit limit changed. And you tell Alerts and Workflow how often it should check for those conditions. That's all part of the setup process. When that setup is done, you turn Alerts and Workflow on. It runs as a Windows service. And it will interest you to know that amongst our 12,000 plus customers, our customer support department on a daily basis receives an average of 8.5 incoming support calls a day. And I hope that you find that a remarkable number, because what that represents is that most customers, when they set up Alerts and Workflow and start it running, they don't contact us but once a year, and that's to renew their maintenance and support contract. It really is a set it and forget it kind of application. Now, Alerts and Workflow comes out of the box with roughly 85 pre-configured alert scenarios, such as the ones you see currently on my window. You'll notice that we've actually divided Sage 300 up into its modules, such as accounts payable, receivable, inventory control, etc. And before I take you on a quick tour through a sample alert event, I just want to touch upon a couple of the other items that you see in this list. You see a branch called Sage 300 and Sage CRM. This is actually a collection of events that look for a combination of conditions between those two applications. So you might recall I talked about cross-application monitoring, such as an example, a new sales opportunity in Sage CRM for a product in Sage 300 that would drop below the stock minimum level because of that new order. So again, these are all events that look at combination of conditions between 300 and Sage CRM. I also want to drop down to a couple of the lower branches here. You see Sage CRM on its own being monitored, as well as a human resources application. But I talked earlier about how Alerts and Workflow can detect very sophisticated conditions, such as a customer who has changed their buying habits. And you might wonder, well, exactly how does it do that? Well, let me show you just a quick example. If you look at, I'm right now in a branch called Sage 300 Sales Order Trends, and we're going to take a look at an event, just briefly, that identifies a customer whose sales for the current month have dropped by at least 30% over the customer's average monthly sales. And if you think about that, that's a fairly sophisticated set of conditions. And normally at the end of the month, every organization would like to be able to perform trend analysis and identify clients who have indeed changed their buying habits, but few organizations have the time to print out and look through all of those reports. Here, Alerts and Workflow can do this automatically and simply deliver to a given account manager an alert, such as an email that says, here is a customer who has changed their buying habits, here's where they used to be on an average basis, and here's where they now are purchasing from us. So let's start off with something a little bit simpler, though. Let's take a look at a fairly typical event, one that identifies invoices that are coming due within the next 7 days. So I've gone back to my accounts receivable branch, and I'm looking at an event that looks for invoices, as I mentioned, that are coming due in the next week. This event is active, and beyond that, we can see that this event is being checked every day at 9 o'clock in the morning. In Alerts and Workflow, you determine how often each condition needs to be monitored. Conditions that are very time sensitive, such as inventory availability, you might check hourly, maybe every 5 minutes, or even continuously. And those that are somewhat less time sensitive, like this one, might be checked daily, weekly, monthly, the first or last day of the month, possibly even the third Thursday of every month. You have complete control. I also like to mention that when you think about monitoring business conditions, you need to ask yourself, do we want to monitor 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or do we only want to monitor Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m.? If no one's going to be there to hear an alert, then I probably shouldn't be monitoring it on those off hours or off days. Likewise, you can set up your own holidays. Again, if no one's going to be around on Boxing Day, as an example, to hear an alert message, then chances are that I should really delay that alert to the day after the holiday. Now, the key behind every event is its query, as this is what identifies the condition that we want Alerts and Workflow to look for. And you'll see that this event is using a query, that's looking at invoices that are coming due within a certain number of days. And in this case, we're triggering on a threshold of 7 days. Now, what I'd like to show about this particular event is that maybe 7 days isn't important to you, maybe 3 days. 1 day, 14 days is important to you. Easy enough for you to make that change. You can come in here and simply change the triggering threshold. In fact, this one query that this event is using can be used in multiple events. You might want to be notified at 7 days, at 3 days, and also at 1 day. Now, I'm often asked, okay, Don, you've shown me a little bit about this query. What if I need to exclude certain customers or do a restriction based upon regions or products or things of that nature? How technical do I need to be in order to make those changes myself? Well, let me answer that question. You don't need to be a programmer. You're not writing Visual Basic code or SQL syntax. You do need to be familiar, in this case, with the Sage 300 database schema. In plain English, you need to know what data sits where. If you've ever written a Crystal report for Sage 300, you have all of the expertise that you need. Because Alerts and Workflow will automatically show you a list of all of the tables and views in the Sage 300 database. You're able to pick and choose what tables you wish to retrieve data from. I'm just going to touch upon a couple of the tabs here. On the Columns tab, you're able to pick and choose what fields of information do you wish to retrieve from the Sage 300 database. We've chosen various fields of information here from our open invoices. Now, you can get more sophisticated here. Maybe you want to total up all of the invoices per customer, per region, per salesperson. You can do that just by selecting the appropriate arithmetic function from this drop-down list. Maybe you want to calculate the number of days until an invoice is due or the number of days overdue that an invoice is. Again, we provide a wizard for you to create that calculation. You're not having to write any kind of programming code. You can use our wizard to come down to the appropriate calculation, such as calculating the difference in days between two dates, and Alerts and Workflow will walk you through the process of creating that sophisticated calculation. Jumping ahead a couple of tabs, I'm able to specify what conditions I want to look for. In this case, I'm looking only for those invoices where the amount due is greater than 0. Everything that you see here is available in plain English format from drop-down lists. You can do Boolean logic, look for conditions A and B or C, D, and E. Very importantly, you can also use Alerts and Workflow to tell you whenever someone has changed the value of any field anywhere in the Sage 300 database. So if perchance someone changes the date due of an invoice, Alerts and Workflow can capture that, and it will capture both the old value and the new value of any field or fields that were changed. Now, these tabs that I've just taken you on a brief tour through, they save you the trouble from writing this. We will show you under the covers or under the hood, depending upon your preferred analogy in Alerts and Workflow. I always like showing people this tab because this is what you don't have to know what to do because of all of the preceding tabs where you can set up the conditions that you want Alerts and Workflow to look for. So, having specified that we want Alerts and Workflow to look only for those invoices that are coming due within 7 days, now we get to decide what we want Alerts and Workflow to do about it. First and foremost, I want Alerts and Workflow to send some kind of an alert to deliver some meaningful information to the appropriate recipients. Here, I'm sending alerts via a number of different methods, including email and instant message and web dashboard. You can see a number of different methods listed here. If we want to edit or modify these alert messages, just a matter of choosing the appropriate message, choosing the edit function, you're taken into that alert in edit mode. And you can see here, for the purpose of an instant message, we're simply showing the invoice number, the amount due, and its due date. Perhaps we might wish to add also the customer in here. So let's find our customer field. I can see it right there. And we're going to say for client, and let's add in the customer's name to this alert message. As far as emails are concerned, you can send emails in plain text or HTML format. Do you need to know HTML syntax? Absolutely not, because Alerts and Workflow ships with a library of HTML templates that you can choose from. So you do not have to know that syntax. If I go back to my main window, you'll notice that this event is also generating an invoice form. If I have an invoice that's coming due within 7 days, I might as well have Alerts and Workflow generate my invoice using my Crystal report, generate that in PDF format, and automatically deliver it, as we'll see in just a couple moments, to the corresponding customer. But I want to stop up here to a chart. I made mention during the PowerPoint presentation that Alerts and Workflow also allows you to generate alerts via chart and graph, such as bar charts, pie charts, etc. Very important to these, I think, are what are called multi-charts or comparative performance charts. How's one sales rep doing relative to another? Or how are sales going this year versus last, or this month versus last? These graphic abilities allow you to chart that and really get the message across in a quick, hard-hitting fashion. Okay. We'll notice also, finally, that Alerts and Workflow is even picking up a Microsoft Word document that instructs customers on how they can use an online bill pay program in order to pay off that invoice. So these are all considered my content that I can have Alerts and Workflow deliver to the appropriate recipients. Those recipients are referred to as subscribers. Now, if you take a look at the 4 subscribers for this particular event, the first one is that I'm notifying everyone in my finance group. Groups are definable by you, and for any individual or group who's being notified, you can notify them via any one or any combination of methods. I like to joke that you can really annoy the heck out of someone with alerts and workflow if you put your mind to it. Pardon me. In this case, we're notifying our finance group via two methods, email and instant message. Myself, I've chosen to be notified via just one alert delivery method, email. But if you think about this scenario, an invoice that's coming due, who really are the two most important people you wish to notify? It's the customer and also the customer's account manager or salesperson. And so very importantly, alerts and workflow allows you to specify what we call dynamic recipients. In this case, as you can see, we are indeed notifying the customer, we are indeed notifying the salesperson, and alerts and workflow is automatically figuring out who those people are based upon the invoice that meets the criteria of this event. We know that an invoice is coming due, therefore we can determine who the customer is, what their email address is, as well as the sales rep and their corresponding email address. By the way, do you need to manually enter email addresses into alerts and workflow? Absolutely not. It will read those addresses, whether they're email addresses, mobile phone numbers, etc., directly from your Sage 300 database, as well as any other application database that you happen to be using. It will even read email address related data from the Active Directory if you wish it to do so. So I've specified now the condition, invoices coming due, what I want to send to people, who I want that content to be delivered to. Last but not least, do I want alerts and workflow to execute some kind of action? Do I want it to go back into Sage 300 and somehow add information to that customer's record, change perhaps the customer's credit limit or credit status? And we've just got a few examples configured here. One of which is, if you think about it, if a customer is past due, you might work with a collections agency. And maybe that agency says at the end of every week or at the end of every month, please create for us a comma-separated file of all customers who have past due invoices, and we'll follow up with them. Well, in fact, that's what this first action is doing. It's creating an export of all coming due invoices. Do I want alerts and workflow to update Sage 300, update other programs, maybe run a custom Visual Basic script? Those are all additional options. A couple of notes about this part of alerts and workflow. Number one, it does include a Visual Basic scripting engine built right into alerts and workflow that allows you to do some very sophisticated integrations. Perhaps most importantly about this actions component of an event is that it is covered under an additional layer of security. Obviously, when you start to talk about writing data back into a database, you need to be very careful about who has the ability to configure events that do this. Not only must a person be authorized for access to Sage Alerts and Workflow, they must be specially authorized for access to this Actions tab. We recognize that this is a powerful capability, and thus you need to carefully control who has access to it. Okay, so just a couple of other items I wanted to touch upon, and then we'll open up the lines for any questions that folks might have. If I come back a little bit, I'd just like to point out some of the other types of conditions that alerts and workflow can monitor for. If, for example, we take a look over at inventory as an example, a number of different pre-configured events here, everything from a change to an item's price, all the way up through monitoring various stock levels on hand, on order, on sales order, changes to an item's recent cost, standard cost, etc. And you can see these and read them as well if I can read them to you, so I won't go through them at this time. However, also, I'd like to point out a rather interesting and creative bit of functionality that was actually created by one of your country mates many years ago. When we first introduced alerts and workflow, and it had the ability to monitor incoming email, and it had the ability to generate crystal reports, it was a customer in Australia who came to us and said, I think you're missing out on something. And we said, really, tell us more. And they said, well, you could actually combine these two capabilities in alerts and workflow to allow someone to send an email message to alerts and workflow, and in that email say something like, please generate for me my AR aging report. And even in that email to be able to specify for what customer or what dollar amounts, etc. Alerts and workflow, having the ability to monitor incoming email, could monitor that email message that is requesting that a specific report be run. Alerts and workflow could then verify that the requester is in fact authorized to receive that report. Alerts and workflow can then automatically generate the report and automatically email it back to the original person who sent in the request. And as you can see, we refer to this capability as reports on demand. And whether it's done through an email that requests a report or through a website, a web forum where someone can come to a web page and select from a list of reports and specify their additional selection criteria. This is just a very, I think, a very cool and innovative use of alerts and workflow to allow people to request and receive, whether it's crystal reports or simply information on demand, simply by sending an email to alerts and workflow. And finally, I want to jump into my own Gmail account, because I know I've been talking a lot about sending alerts and emails and faxes and all sorts of messages. So I certainly don't want to stop speaking without showing you what one of these alert messages might say. This is actually from a customer of ours who had configured this themselves. They wanted to create an email alert message that would show those sales order deliveries that were both coming due and overdue. And as you can see in this particular email alert message, it shows up in a nice looking grid. We've got 3 sales order numbers, some details about them, their value, and very importantly also in the email message is not just the individual value of each order, but the total value of all of them that meet this event's criteria. So again, just an example of an alert message that can be delivered by alerts and workflow. So let me jump back into our PowerPoint presentation, because we do have one more slide, 2 more slides, I think, that I wish to mention, and then, as promised, I will take any questions that folks have. There are a number of resources that you can avail yourself of if you'd like to look into alerts and workflow more closely. I'm actually going to start all the way at the furthest right on the current slide. The live shipping software is available for you to download and try out. It's a 30-day trial. Absolutely nothing is disabled. All the functionality that I've talked about, you can try out. If you need any technical assistance as you're going through that, you have free and unlimited access to our tech support department. The manual for alerts and workflow has been the recipient of a few awards. We actually wrote it courtesy of some English majors, so it's actually downright readable. And with that is also an online library of audio-video training courses that are also free for you to download and take a look at. If you'd simply like to have a customized demo of alerts and workflow, we'll be happy to provide that to you. A recording of this presentation and similar presentations are available as pre-recorded videos, and of course the return on investment calculator that I mentioned earlier is also downloadable for you to plug in your own numbers. Finally, we come to this last slide with some URLs on it. The website for alerts and workflow is exactly as its name implies, alertsandworkflow.com, all spelled out. All of the materials that I just mentioned are available there. I also made mention of the training videos, and certainly feel free to reach out to the good folks right nearby at Microchannel for any additional questions.